Hashem. This week's parasha is parashas Behaalotecha. And what I like to do today, because there are,
I have some voice back.
oh, okay, hold on one second. Okay, so what I like to do today, this topic, this parasha Behaalotecha has so many topics in it. All that is there's so many seemingly unconnected topics. So I want to just do first an overview of the whole portion so people are aware what's in it. Because otherwise, we just focus on one aspect of it, like we did on Monday, and we won't get the full picture of this portion. So the first section deals with the commandment to light the menorah, and that in the previous portion it was taught that the Nisiim had brought their special sacrifices and to consecrate the altar. And in this portion, it begins by saying that Hashem said to Moshe to tell Aaron and say that you have a special task, and your task will be to light the menorah, to light the seven-branched candelabrum. And he's told that in the future, your descendants will have an even greater task, which is that because of you, there will be the holiday of Hanukkah. I just want to say one thing about the seven candles, the seven-branched menorah, that the Behaalotecha says that this relates to the menorah in heaven. That there's a menorah, that our menorah on earth, our seven-branched candelabrum, relates to the seven-branched branched menorah in heaven. What's a seven-branched menorah in heaven? Those are the seven celestial beings that are visible to the naked eye. That's what the Behaalotecha says. And I don't have it in front of me, but he lists like the earth, the sun, Mars, Venus, whatever. I forget all seven. But he lists the seven. And so that's to teach us this powerful idea that God's menorah and our menorah are linked together. So this is the first passage, this idea that we're supposed to light the seven-branch menorah. The second passage in the portion is the concept of consecrating the Levites for their service in the temple. In order to consecrate the Levites first, they needed to be purified. And how are they purified? They were purified by having all the hairs from their body shaved. They had the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled upon them. And in addition, they had to wash their garments. And then after that, they had to take a bull and as a ola offering, and a second bull as a sin offering. And the Levites came before the people, and everybody gathered, and they placed their hands on the Levites, and then Aaron had to pick up the 22,000 Levites and wave them. He literally had to lift them up and wave them, and that's how the Leviim became separated from all the other tribes for service to God. And what was their service consisting of? It says here that their service was consisting of carrying the ark, or carrying the holy utensils, or carrying the different parts of the Mishkan. And in addition to that, to being a mishmeret, a watch for the temple. Now the Levites had a different age cutoff for their service than everybody else. Then the other people, their age for cutoff was from 20 to 60. But the Levites, here it says, were from age 25 to 50, but another source, Rashi points out, says from age 30 to 50. And Rashi says that really was from 30 to 50, but from 25 to 30 was where they were trained. They had 5 years of training first, and then afterwards they served. So why in one place does it say 25, one place it says 30? It's to teach us an idea. Rashi says that if a student is studying something for 5 years and doesn't show any progress, maybe it's time to move on and pick a new field. Meaning to say that after 5 years, if you don't see any progress, it's time to move on. So at that point, after we learned, so now we've seen that there was a menorah for Aaron to light every night, And in addition to that, we saw that the Levites were purified to be separated for their holy role, for their holy purpose. And now we come to chapter 9, verse 1, and that's the fourth section. So the first was the menorah, the second was separating the Levites and purifying them. And then we had the idea of what age they served. But now we come to the fourth section, which was that the children that they were told to bring the Paschal lamb in they were told to bring the Paschal lamb on the second year after they left. This was when they had to, on Pesach. The first year of Pesach was their exodus. And now, on the second year, they were told to bring the Paschal lamb. But the Rashi, so a couple of problems happened. First of all, why is this taught here? Really, this is the first month of the second year, and the book of Bamidbar begins in the second month, the second year in the second month of the second year. So Rash says from here we learn the principle that the Torah is not written in chronological order, because obviously chapter 9 book of Bamidbar must take place before chapter 1 of the book of Bamidbar. So what's it doing here? So Rashi says it was because that it was like burying bad news, so to speak, meaning to say, because all the other years that in the wilderness, the children of Israel did not bring the Paschal lamb because they were traveling. So they didn't bring it all the other years. So this was the only year that they brought the Paschal lamb. And that was a defect. And so in order to not amplify the nature of this defect, the Torah doesn't discuss the Paschal lamb in a more prominent place, which is at the beginning of the book, but only mentions it in this place, which is buried towards the middle to end of the book. So that's the idea, that they had to bring the Paschal lamb. And the first year they brought the Paschal lamb, they were part of Pesach, but now they were commemorating Pesach for the first time. But when that happened, there were people who were unable to bring the Paschal lamb, and they were considered to be tamei nefesh. They had come in contact with the dead, so they couldn't bring the Paschal lamb. So they went out and said, they went out and said to Moshe, why should we be diminished? Lama nigara. Why should we be diminished to bring the Paschal lamb in its proper time? And so Rashi says that that these people merited to have a whole passage in the Torah taught about them. What was the passage? The Pesach Sheni. The idea that if you miss the Paschal lamb service, and you have a good reason, either you were far away or you were tamei, and so therefore you couldn't have participated, you were allowed to bring it a month later, what's called Pesach Sheni. But these people, this law could have been taught by Moses directly without them having to go say to Moshe, why do we miss it? But because they had engaged in a meritorious act, therefore, for this reason, Megalgo and Schus Ayidei Zakai, they merited to have a great merit. And what was their merit? Their merit was that this passage was taught through them. What was the thing that they did initially to achieve a merit? It says Megalgo and Schus Ayidei Zakai. What was the action they did initially to achieve a merit? So Rashi, just 1 second, I'll just finish it. So the Midrash tells us that there were three things that they did initially to achieve a merit. What were the three things? There were three basic explanations of possibilities of why these people had become tamei. One possibility is that they were carrying the bones of Joseph, and so therefore that was a merit, and so therefore that was the reason why they merited to have this passage taught through them. A second explanation possibility was that this is referring to Mishael and El Tzafan, who were the uncles of Nadav and Avihu, who carried out their corpses after they sinned in the temple. And the third approach was the approach that they had come in contact, they had seen an unattended dead body and they tended to it. So because they did these mitzvos, Megalgo and Schus Ayidei Zakai, they merited to achieve this great action of this passage, and the Torah was being taught through them. And it's all because they showed this tremendous desire. Lama nigara. We want to have the opportunity to engage in a mitzvah. We want to have the opportunity. Hold on. Right. Okay. So But, so back to the text of the Torah, the text tells us that from here we learn about the concept of a tamei, of a Pesach Sheni. That if you're far away and you're unable to bring the Paschal offering, then you'll bring it in the second, 1 month later, on the 14th day of that month, you shall bring the Karban Pesach, or bring a Paschal lamb. And this is the idea that those who miss the Paschal lamb have the opportunity to replace it. We see, I just want to mention in passing, that we have two aspects to here. This is the only holiday that you could do a do-over. Don't think, oh, okay, I missed Yom Kippur, I'll do Yom Kippur next week. No, there is no concept like that. It's only this concept. And the second idea is you just see the strong desire of these people to do the mitzvah. They said, Lama nigara, why should we be diminished? They didn't say, oh, I get an exemption. Like, okay, when COVID was in its full force, people said, oh, I get an exemption from going to synagogue. Yay. No, it's a horrible thing that if you are unable to participate in a mitzvah, they felt deeply diminished. And so that strong desire brought about this mitzvah of the Pesach Sheni. Okay, so now we've seen, I think we're up to 5 topics already. We continue, and then it says, then we learn about the cloud that was covering the Mishkan. That when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, there was a cloud that used to cover the Mishkan, and in the evening, it appeared like a pillar of fire. So there was a cloud that covered the Mishkan during the day. In the evening, there'll be a pillar of fire. So there was always this cloud or fire over the camp of the wilderness. And when the cloud, the people knew how to travel. And the reason why they knew how to travel was when the cloud would go up from the tent and the children of Israel would travel. And wherever the cloud settled, that's how they knew to settle. So nowadays, everybody has all their data backed up on the cloud. But the whole idea of a cloud being our salvation comes from right here. This is the ultimate backup, the ultimate security plan, the ultimate cybersecurity is the cloud of glory. And so the children of Israel in the wilderness only traveled on the basis of God, and on the basis of Hashem they camped. So this is this concept of the cloud. Hold on one second. Okay, so then that's the idea that we traveled on the basis of God. And then even though we traveled on the basis of the cloud, the next paragraph teaches us that about the shofar blowing. That when Moshe wanted to gather the children of Israel to travel, that Hashem said, make 2 trumpets out of silver, and that will be what you called everybody together. So when you blast 2 trumpets, everybody knows to gather at the entrance to the tent. But if you blast one of them, that's a sign that the princes and the heads of the tribes should come. So these are the different ways of summoning. They didn't have email lists. They didn't have WhatsApp. They gathered people with the trumpets. And then it states something which is very, very important to us for Rosh Hashanah. It says you blast a trua. When you do the trua sound, which is what we know on Rosh Hashanah, is the sound of a cry, a staccato sound. And then when you blast the trua, that's how everybody's supposed to travel. And you blast it again, and the next group travels. But when you gather everybody, you do a tekiah. And then it states in verse 9, because people are always asking, and there's so much in this parasha that we don't focus on this, but this is such a fundamental idea. Why do we blast the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Why are we blasting the shofar? Well, right here it says, when you come to war in your lands and you have a distress, we have something that you're in distress, blast the trumpets. And then you'll be remembered before God and you'll be saved. So one reason, there's so far we've seen now a few reasons for blasting the shofar. One is to gather everybody together. Second is it's a sign of distress. So it's a prayer before God. And now we have a third reason, says the text of the Torah. On the day of your holidays, on the day of your festivals, on the day of your Rosh Chodesh, blast the trumpets for your sacrifice, and that will be a remembrance before Hashem. So a third reason, so we've seen in our portion 3 reasons why we blast the shofar, either to gather everyone together, or in a time of distress, or in a time of joy. So when we blast the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, when we hear the shofar, we should have this in mind, that the shofar is either distress, joy, or it's a time to gather. So now that we've gone through these passages, then they talk about the order of the fact that the children of Israel began to travel from Sinai. They began to travel from the Sinai for the first time. And this, ever since they camped at Sinai, this is the first time they're traveling. The Rashi we discussed on Monday told us that there was a sin with the way they traveled the first time because they were too joyous to leave Sinai. I want to just point out that the traveling is also very, very deep, that we see the order in which they gather, the order in which they camp. And also it states that the tribe of Dan was the Ma'asef. That was the Ma'asef for all the Machanot. So they used to travel last. Why do they travel last? So the Gemara in Eruvin, the Jerusalem Talmud in Eruvin, says that because Dan had the biggest population, they went last because they would have the most people to find if anybody dropped something along the way, and they could return it. So that's why the tribe of Dan traveled last. Okay, so then now that portion discusses the order of the traveling, and now we're still not even at the midway point of the portion, and we get into a very cryptic passage, which is the conversation between Moshe and Chovav ben Reuel the Midianite. Who is Chovav? The rabbis identify this figure with Yisro. It's a whole question. Why is he called Chovav? And anyway, so it's a mystery as well. The rabbis dealt with this question. And Moshe asks Chovav, his father-in-law, the Midianite, so the rabbis identify this person as Yisro. He asks him to stay with him and to travel with him and be their guide. And he says, we're going to the land that God promised us. And he invites Chovav to come with him. And Chovav says, I will not go. I'm going back to my land. And Moshe begs him not to go. Moshe begs him to be his eyes. And he says, if you travel with us, it'll be good. And we don't know what happens. The story is cryptic. The text leaves it unresolved. We don't know if his father-in-law stays or goes. We just know that he begged him to stay with us, which is a whole question. Why did he need his father-in-law to be his guide? We have the cloud of glory. We have the pillar of fire. They traveled on the basis of God. Why did he need his father-in-law to be his guide? And then it says that they traveled for 3 days. And after that, we come to the passage which we discussed on Monday, which is the 85 letters. The idea that the ark traveled before them, and this is Vahiben Sharon with the backwards nuns. So in itself, a whole book in and of itself. And finally, after that, we come to the second half of the portion. The second half of the portion is a passage which is filled with the I would say negative stories, and it starts to go downhill for the children of Israel. So first, that we have chapter 11, verse 1, that they began to complain to God, meaning to say that what was their complaint? They were complaining to God. They were coming up with pretexts. They said, Rashi says, we've gone 3 days in the journey and it's been too difficult for us. So God heard that they were complaining and he felt that they were complaining improperly, and God got angry and he sent fire upon them, and the fire consumed them at the edge of the camp. So right 3 days after they left Sinai, they already complained, and God visits them with a plague. And the people cried out to Moshe, and Moshe prayed to God. Moshe prayed to God that and the fire stopped. And so they called the place Tavera because the fire burnt inside them. And now we have another sin. And who is this? Now we have another sin. What's the other sin? The other sin is that the Asfasfuf, who were in their midst, they also complained. Who are these Asfasfuf? These are the Erev, the mixed multitude. When they left Egypt, groups of people who were not descendants of Jacob joined with them. And these were people who caused all these problems now. And they sat there and they started to cry. And they said, we want meat. We need meat to eat. And they said, and this is, again, one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible. It just shows human psychology. It says, we remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for free. The cucumbers and the watermelons and the vegetables, the leeks and the onions and the garlic. So first of all, the rabbis have two different explanations about what this means. And the Gemara in Yoma says that one is they were actually remembering the actual fish. The other explanation is no, that they were saying that fish is a euphemism, that they're lamenting the fact that now they're limited in who they can engage in carnal desires with, because they are limited by the laws that they received at Sinai. And so they're lamenting their new restriction. And so, and of course, the whole irony is we remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for free. Of course, it wasn't free. They were slaves. But the slave thinks that what he gets is free because they're small-minded. And so, and now they start complaining about the man, meaning every single day God gives them man coming down from heaven. And what do these people say about that? They're complaining about it because all we have is the man. But Rashi, the Gemara in Yoma tells us that they actually, the man was able to have the flavor of all these different foods. And so their complaint was baseless. They had no basis for this complaint. So the people went out and they, and in the Torah describes the man, that the man tasted like shada shemen. They baked it into cakes, and it tastes like the shada shemen. Rashi says it had the taste of oil, and also the word shad is related to he says it's related basically to nursing, because it's like they were able to this is what the Gemara in Yuma said. But Tam was shad Hashem, and Mao was shad, but this is like shadayim, like the breast of a woman. Because says Rabbi Avo, just like a baby tastes, when a baby nurses, he gets all its nourishment and he tastes many different foods. So too the man that all of Israel eats has many different flavors in it. So, or just like this. Okay, anyway, so that's the idea of the power of the man. But they were complaining about it. The Jewish people were basically looking at this gift and saying, we don't want it. So Moshe heard this, and he heard the people crying, and God got upset. And Moshe said to God, he complains about his people. That's how we know. It says, why did you give me such a bad people? Why did I not find favor in your eyes? I have this burden of this people. And now we have a very, very powerful phrase that Moshe says. He says, I love this verse also. He says, Anochi Ariti, did I conceive them, these people? Did I give birth to them? That you said to me that I have to carry them in a bosom like a maid carries a baby on the earth to the earth that you swore to your fathers. Moshe says, I don't get it. I don't want it. And then Moshe says, from where will I get the meat to give to these people? That they're saying, give us meat. I can't do it myself. It's too much. And then Moshe says, and if this is what you're going to do to me, kill me. And Moshe has a breakdown. He says it's too much for him. 3 days. 3 days it took for this to happen. 3 days. That's the irony. 3 days from Sinai. They didn't last 3 days. So God said to Moshe, okay, here's the idea. He says, okay, it's too much for you. Gather for me 70 men from the elders of Israel and take them to the tent and stand there. And basically what God's going to do is God is going to take from the aura of Moshe and spread it out among 70 people. And I'll go down, I'll speak with you from the spirit that I placed upon them, and they'll share your burden. And say to the people, be sanctified tomorrow, because tomorrow you're going to eat meat, because God heard your cries. And you said it was better for us in Egypt. And so not for 1 day or 2 days, not 5 days or 10 days or 20 days, you're going to have so much meat for a month. And then Moshe commits what many say is his sin. This is the sin of Moses. Moshe says to God, you can't, it's impossible. Moshe says to God, there are 600,000 men in my midst, and you're saying I'm going to give them meat and they're going to eat for a month? How's that possible? Even if we find sheep and cattle and slaughter it, all the fish of the sheep, where are you going to do this? It's too hard. Moshe says to God, it's impossible. So Moshe is also, we see from here, Moshe is stumbling in this portion. He's lost his patience with the people, given up on his people, and he's saying something is impossible. And God says to him, you think this is impossible? Is there anything that's too hard for God? And Moshe went out, he gathered the 70 elders, and he took from his spirit, and it went on to the other people. Now, here we have a very powerful incident, which is also one of my favorite incidents in the whole Torah. Chapter 11, verse 26, there were 2 men who remained back in the camp, and they were not with the other 70. And these 2 men, their names were Eldad and Medad. And it's all questioned. It says they were written down. So the Talmud says in Sanhedrin that all the names of who was going to be picked were listed on lottery, and they were supposed to be amongst them, but they didn't go out of respect. So they stayed back. But what was their prophecy? They were prophesying in their tents. What was the prophecy? The Talmud Sanhedrin says that their prophecy was almost treasonous. They said Moshe is going to die and Joshua will take the people into the land. That was one theory. Another theory was they were prophesying apocalyptic about Gog and Magog. And a third theory was they were prophesying about the quail. And anyway, I always am partial to the idea that they were prophesying that Moshe was going to die and Joshua will lead them in, because it says in the next verse that a youth ran and told Moshe, and he says, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Who is this youth who ran? It doesn't identify him, but Rashi says this is the son of Moses, Gershom. All of a sudden we see it makes sense that there was some jealousy, that they were prophesying that Moshe was going to die. And Joshua, when he hears this, gets so upset. And he says, my master Moshe, destroy them. Destroy these people. Adoni Moshe kilaim. So first of all, another famous Talmudic, often quoted Talmudic text says, what did he mean when Joshua said destroy them? What did he mean? He said, make them the synagogue presidents, because that will destroy them. They'll disintegrate on their own. He doesn't say exact where it says make them communal, give them a communal responsibility, make them the synagogue presidents, and they will disintegrate on their own. That's what the Gemara in Sanhedrin says. So Moshe says when he hears this, he says to Joshua, he hears that there are two renegade prophets prophesying in their tent. Moshe says to Joshua, Hamikanei atali, are you jealous on my behalf? I wish all of the people would be prophets, that God should give his spirit upon them. So Moshe says, no, I want everybody to be a prophet, everybody to be a prophet. So Moshe says, let 1,000 flowers bloom. No, not just my flower, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And then we have the passage that all the quail came, and there was another plague that happened, and God struck them down, and we call that plague Behaalotecha. Also, actually, ironically, this passage is the source for the idea that you have to wait a period of time after eating meat before eating milk, because it says the meat was still between their teeth. And the Gemara in Chulin says, from the fact that it says the meat was still between their teeth, we see from here that even though it's still between your teeth, it's called meat, and you can't eat milk with it. And that's why if you eat meat, you're not allowed to eat cheese. Not even at the same time, but even afterwards, you have to wait. Ashkenazi custom is to wait 6 hours. Anyway, so there was a tremendous plague there because God smote them down because they sinned in asking for the quail. And then we come to the paragraph, the paragraph that also a tremendously enigmatic paragraph, that Miriam and Aaron were gossiping about Moshe because he took a Cushite woman as a wife. So who is this Cushite woman that he took as a wife? So Rashi identifies her with Zipporah, but the problem is Zipporah was not Cushite, she was Midianite. So what does this mean? So the literal text is that they didn't like that Moshe took a Cushite woman. It's like shades of Solomon taking a Queen of Sheba. And they said, what gives Moshe the right to be a better prophet than us? Do you think God only spoke to Moshe? He also spoke to us. And the verse tells us that Moshe was the most humble man on the face of the earth. So God punishes Miriam, and she gets Sarat at that point. And God tells them that Moses is a fundamentally different prophet than everybody else. That God appears to everybody else in a dream, but with Moshe directly, I speak face to face and not in riddles. And you should have been more careful, more afraid to speak about Moshe in that manner. So God got upset at them, and behold, Miriam is filled with this biblical disease called Sarat, and Aaron begs Moshe to pray for Miriam because she's in deep distress. So Moshe cries out to God, and he cries out to Hashem, and he says this prayer, which is only 5 words. And we see from here that prayer does not have to be very long. The most powerful prayers are short. There's no reason why a synagogue service should take hours and hours and hours. It could be very short. And Moshe says to God, El na rafanawa, please God, heal her now. Please God, heal her now. And we also see from here, the Talmud says there was an incident. This is the Gemara in Brachos 34a. There was an incident with a student that began to pray, and his prayer was very short. So the people responded and say, look how short of a prayer he's saying. So he says, is he shorter than Moses? Talmud says, please God, heal her now. We need to say, the shorter the prayer, the better. I want to say that I have a theory. Okay, my theory is, and then afterwards they waited for Miriam to be healed, and then they left. My theory is that what happened is the synagogue service became so long, and it became so long because people stopped going every day. So they try to make up for it on Shabbat by making it extra long. So it's like compounding the first mistake. The first mistake is people don't pray every day. The second mistake is that they ruin the service that's supposed to be on Shabbat. Doesn't have to be that long. Why is it that long? There's no reason why a service in a synagogue should be 3 hours. And what happens is that leads to a third sin. First is people don't pray every day. Second is they ruin the prayers by making them too long. This is my hot take. And then the third sin is because it's taking so long, people don't take the prayers seriously, and they talk and they lose focus, and the prayers become a show. So these are the three sins that happen. First, it all happens from people not praying every day. Then they pray too long on the Saturday, and then people talk during the services and ruin the services. So that's why I believe the prayer should be much shorter. Anyway, that's my theory. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address.